Ressa Moor was ordered to watch her husband's sky charts burn beneath the root that had killed him. The Cloud War chamber hung above the palace on chains of black dragon iron, its glass floor suspended over 3,000 feet of empty air. Storm clouds moved beneath the council's boots. Lightning revealed the distant shapes of royal dragons circling the mountain spires. At the center of the chamber, Ressa's charts burned inside a silver brazier. Years of wind calculations curled into ash. The flight paths Tovan had carried into battle blackened one careful line at a time. Ressa stood before the war council in a dark widow's coat fastened to her throat. She had tied her graying brown hair away from her face because she would not let the men watching her mistake loose strands for trembling. Prince Dragon Volaris fed another chart into the flame. This was the civilian deviation, he said. The route that opened the eastern flank and delivered the fleet into the Veyran storm trap. His voice carried grief with practiced restraint. He had served beside Tovan Moor. He had spoken at the funeral, where no body had been returned. Now he held Tovan's final work between two gloved fingers. Ressa stepped forward. That is not the route the fleet received. Kaldor released the parchment. Fire climbed through the ink. The command copy bears your mark. My mark approved the southern passage. The fleet turned east. After my copy left this chamber, a few counselors looked toward Dragon King Narek Volaris. He stood at the far end of the suspended table beneath the royal storm banner. Black armor covered him from throat to wrist, shaped to move with the powerful wings folded behind him. The left wing remained slightly lower than the right. Only someone who had once mapped his flight balance would have noticed. Ressa had noticed the moment he entered. The ambush had left that wing storm-scarred. It had left her without a husband. Narek placed one hand on the table. The inquiry confirmed the eastern turn began under Moor route authority. The inquiry compared the wreckage with the command that survived, Ressa said. It never examined the command that burned inside the storm. Kaldor's expression softened in the way powerful men softened when preparing to dismiss a woman without appearing cruel. Ressa, grief has kept you inside this chamber longer than your office permits. My office ended when you blamed me for the dead. Your office ended because 9 dragons and 47 riders followed your deviation into lightning. My deviation led away from the town beneath them. Silence moved through the chamber. Below the glass floor, cloud opened briefly over the mountain settlement of Halvern Reach. Ressa had redirected the fleet because enemy fire was descending toward its roofs. More than 800 civilians had been trapped between the storm wall and the eastern ridge. The official history called the change unnecessary. The survivors called it the reason they were alive. Narek's eyes remained on the burning charts. You changed the original route without royal permission. I changed it because your fleet would have driven the storm directly over Halvern Reach. You were not commanding the fleet. No, I was calculating what your commanders refused to see. The words landed harder than she intended. Kaldor moved beside the brazier, and Tovan followed his wife's judgment instead of the battle order. Ressa looked at him. Tovan followed the route I gave him because he knew where the civilians were, and died inside the result. He died after someone altered it. Narek's face tightened. For one breath, the chamber smelled not of burning parchment but of rain striking hot scales. Ressa remembered another night in this room. Narek had stood beside her while she drew the fleet's path through a winter storm. He had recognized her hand without reading the signature. Your lines narrow before danger, he had once said. You make fear look disciplined. Now he had summoned the council to destroy the same work. Kaldor lifted the final chart. Tovan Moor's captain copy. Ressa saw the small crescent cut in its lower edge. Tovan had always marked the page he intended to carry personally. She moved before she could stop herself. Give me that. 2 guards lowered their spears across her path. Kaldor held the chart over the brazier. If the crown preserves disputed routes, it appears to conceal failure. My brother has chosen transparency. Narek looked at Ressa. This council will not protect the royal family by hiding a navigator's mistake. The sentence was meant for the nobles watching him. Ressa understood that. It still reached her as betrayal. You are not proving the crown honest, she said. You are destroying the only language the storm can still read. Narek's gaze sharpened. The storm does not testify. No, but wind remembers pressure. Kaldor dropped Tovan's chart into the brazier. Narek had not burned a mistake. He had burned the only surviving language of her husband's last decision. The parchment folded inward. Ressa watched her husband's crescent mark disappear beneath white flame. Something above them answered. The living storm map covered the entire vaulted ceiling of the chamber, a field of dark glass veined with silver channels, built to display active weather over the kingdom. It had been still since the ambush. Now lightning moved inside it, not downward from the clouds. Across the map, counselors stepped back as silver wind lines appeared over the ceiling. Ressa's original southern route formed first, drawn in pale blue light from the palace toward Halvern Reach. Then another hand entered the memory. A red lightning line cut across hers. It turned the royal fleet east, straight into the storm trap. Caldor stared upward. The map is reacting to the fire. Ressa did not move. The living storm map remembers every hand that changes a route during an active storm command. Pressure, direction, command heat, sequence. It did not know treason. It knew alteration. The red line brightened. At its beginning, the map formed the outline of a hand pressing against the route plate. A prince's signet burned on one finger. The Volaris dragon split by a single downward claw. Caldor's private seal. Above the council, red lightning ran from his preserved hand to the image of 9 royal dragons burning inside the clouds. Narek looked from the map to his brother. Ressa looked only at the route. Her charts had not led the fleet into the ambush. Someone had taken her rescue line and turned it into a grave. Caldor's seal proved a hand had entered the storm command. It did not yet prove why that hand had turned rescue into death. The red lightning remained fixed across the living storm map, cutting from Caldor's preserved hand to the burned fleet inside the eastern clouds. Caldor recovered before the council did. A disputed chart was burned beneath an active weather vault, he said. The map is reacting to heat, grief, and damaged command residue. It is not lawful evidence. Ressa looked at the red line. The map does not remember grief. Storm pressure can distort. Direction can bend. Sequence cannot. Narek's gaze moved from his brother to the ceiling. He had not withdrawn the accusation against Ressa. The guard still stood between her and the brazier. Ash from Tovin's captain copy drifted across the glass floor. Open the original route plate, he ordered. Caldor turned toward him. The plate contains active military corridors and royal flight weaknesses. War law forbids its exposure before a civilian navigator. Ressa did not look away from Narek. You ended my office when you blamed me. You did not erase what I know. Narek's expression hardened. Open it. The route plate lay beneath the suspended war table, inside a casing of storm bronze. When officers lifted it free, it looked almost plain. A dark metal disc crossed by shallow silver channels. Every approved route entered through pressure. Every later change left heat in the channel that carried it. Ressa held out her hand. One officer hesitated. Narek said, "Give it to her." She accepted the plate without thanking him. The southern passage still held her work. Its pressure marks narrowed before Halvern Reach, then widened beyond the town to let the fleet disperse above open cloud. Ressa traced the line with one finger, reading depth as another person might read handwriting. "This is mine," Caldor said. "No one disputes that you created the deviation. My route bends around the town. The red line cuts away after it." She turned the plate toward the storm lamps. A second channel appeared beneath the first, pressed harder and later. The blue route entered before the captain copy left the chamber. The red alteration was forced in afterward. "How can you establish when the copy left?" Narek asked. Ressa pointed to a crescent-shaped release mark beside the channel. Tovin cut every captain copy before he carried it. The plate registers the pressure when parchment is lifted from the route bed. His copy was already gone when the eastern turn entered. Narek looked toward the ash where Tovin's chart had burned. "So, he flew with your southern route?" "Yes," then changed course later. He received another command. Caldor stepped closer. "Captains may alter formation under storm threat." Tovan would have marked his correction with a double wing press. There was no time. There was enough time for someone else to use the royal channel. Silence tightened around the chamber. Ressa followed the red line backward. It did not begin at the civilian navigator's edge. It entered through the central groove, reserved for messages sent directly to a flight captain during battle. The groove still carried command heat, not enough to burn, enough to name rank. Narek's hand closed on the war table. Who had access? The Dragon King. The secondary commander. Whoever held a royal storm, key after launch. Caldor's voice remained controlled. I was secondary commander. Emergency access was my duty. Access proves contact, Ressa said. Not purpose. She would not repeat the council's error. She would not call contact motive before the route gave sequence. Ressa pressed 2 fingers to the red channel. The alteration carried 3 layers. A command opening the royal line, Caldor's pressure turning the fleet east. A heat seal authorizing the change as sovereign. Narek saw her pause. What is it? The route was not accepted on Caldor's authority alone. Caldor looked at the plate rather than his brother. A secondary command required royal validation in an active storm. Narek's face went still. I gave no Eastern order. The fleet received one. Ressa moved closer to the storm lamps. The sovereign heat seal had been pressed so deeply that it scarred the bronze. She recognized the mark. Every royal storm key carried a unique split in its central tooth. Narek's key left a long vertical burn crossed by a short diagonal line. That mark was here. I was in the northern wing when the ambush began, he said. And your storm key? Ressa asked. Narek did not answer. Caldor did. My brother placed it in command custody before launch. Ressa looked at Narek. He had burned her charts to prove the crown concealed nothing. Now the route plate showed that the false order had entered the fleet under his own seal. The royal validation came after Tovan received her captain copy, but before the fleet reached Halvern Reach. Someone had used Narek's war seal to make Caldor's alteration impossible for Tovan to refuse. The red route had not merely entered through a prince's hand. It had entered wearing the Dragon King's command. It did not prove Narek had ordered the eastern turn. It proved his command had been used after he stopped guarding it. The route plate had cleared Ressa's hand. It had not yet cleared the king's. Narek's command heat still burned in the sovereign channel, darker than every other mark on the bronze. Caldor stood beneath it with his hands folded behind his back. Royal validation was required once the fleet entered an active storm, he said. A secondary commander could not redirect 9 dragons without the king's authority. Narek looked at him. Who held my storm key? The command custody office. That is not a name. It is the lawful answer. Ressa watched Narek's left wing shift lower behind him. Once, she had adjusted entire formations around that old injury. Now the same man who had trusted her, to read his flight balance, had burned her charts before asking who carried his authority into battle. Open the custody record, he ordered. Caldor remained composed. Command custody contains sealed wartime transfers. Exposing it before a dismissed navigator violates royal channel law. You dismissed me, Ressa said. The storm key did not. Narek did not withdraw the guards or restore her place at the table. Open it. An officer released a narrow drawer beneath the command dais. Inside lay a chain-bound ledger and a row of black iron key rests. Each rest carried the heat print of the royal storm key assigned to it. Narek's rest was empty. Ressa touched the metal beside it. Cold. The key had not returned after the ambush. Storm key heat cannot be copied from wax, ink, or memory, she said. The metal must touch the route channel. If your seal is on the eastern order, the key entered the plate itself. Caldor answered, which is exactly what emergency protocol allowed. Narek opened the ledger. Royal Storm Key, deposited by Dragon King Narek Volaris before fleet launch. Custody transferred to secondary command in the event of king separation. Emergency use permitted under active storm collapse. The line bore a Narek Swamak. Ressa looked at him. You placed it in custody. I was leading the northern wing. You gave someone else the right to speak with your heat. The fleet needed continuity if I was cut off. Caldor inclined his head. And he was. Caldor claimed the eastern wall had risen faster than projected, and that he used the key to prevent the fleet from being crushed between storm fronts. Ressa turned to the custody timing column. Each use of the key left the hour, altitude, and command layer behind. Key released from custody after launch. Captain route already acknowledged. Halvern Reach protection point passed. Her fingers stopped. The key was used after Tovan cleared the civilian corridor. The storm changed after that point, Caldor said. No, the collapse warning came earlier. At this altitude, the fleet was already beyond the compression front. There was no storm wall left to avoid. Narek looked at the timing marks. Then why issue an emergency correction? Ressa followed the pulse sequence deeper. The first heat opened the royal channel. The second suppressed captain refusal. The third forced formation obedience. This was not a rescue correction, she said. It was an override. Captains refuse lawful orders when visibility fails, Kaldor replied. Tovan did not refuse because he was lost. He refused because your eastern turn led into the trap. Narek looked at his brother. He refused you? The fleet hesitated. That is not what she asked. Kaldor held his gaze. Captain Moor challenged the route under combat conditions. Tovan's refusal mark remained in the ledger. 2 short heat cuts against the command line, the flight captain's signal for route conflict. Then came the king's storm key. A royal seal did not make a command true. It made refusal impossible. Tovan did not choose the grave, Ressa said. He obeyed a command wearing the king's heat. Narek's face went still. He had burned her charts because he believed public destruction proved royal honesty. Now his authority stood inside the lie that destroyed her husband. Who released the key to Kaldor? He asked. The custody officer lowered his eyes. The emergency order was already filed. A parchment strip had been inserted between the custody lines. The top carried Kaldor's request for secondary command access. The bottom carried Narek's war mark. Ressa examined the edges. The mark was placed before the request was completed. Kaldor said, "Pre-signed authority is standard when a king divides command." It was blank when he signed it, Ressa said. Narek remembered a stack of emergency orders placed before him before dawn. The fleet had already been waiting in the cloud docks. Kaldor had stood at his right hand while Narek signed each strip so no delay would fracture command once they separated. He had trusted his brother with unfinished authority. How many blank orders did I sign? 6, the custody officer said. Ressa lifted the parchment toward the storm lamps. Beneath the later writing, pressure scars showed the original empty field. Kaldor had not forged the Dragon King's mark. He had filled the silence beneath it. The final custody line opened under the heat. Emergency access granted to Prince Dragon Volaris. Purpose entered after royal signature. Override Captain Tovan Moor by sovereign authority. Narek had not ordered the eastern turn, but he had signed the empty command that made it lawful. Tovan had died obeying a blank space Narek had trusted to his brother. Narek had signed the blank command, but Kaldor still had not said why Tovan needed to obey it. The emergency strip lay open beneath the storm lamps. Narek's war mark burned into the lower edge, and Kaldor's later order filling the space above it. Kaldor looked at his brother without lowering his head. Divided command requires prepared authority. You signed because the fleet could not wait for a king trapped in another storm wing. A lawful blank does not make the route true, Ressa said. It makes the route enforceable. That is not the same thing. Narek's hand remained on the table. Why did Tovan refuse the eastern turn? Kaldor answered carefully. Because he had already committed to the civilian deviation. Changing formation after Halvern Reach would have cost him time and pride. Not pride. Ressa moved to the chamber's western observation frame and released the old storm lens mounted there. Dust filmed the black crystal, but the edge still carried 9 shallow scratches, 1 for each dragon lost. What are you looking for? Narek asked. The reason Tovan marked route conflict. Kaldor folded his arms. The trap destroyed the fleet. It did not announce itself beforehand, not to command height. Ressa angled the lens toward the east. The crystal retained pressure scars from major lightning fields crossing the kingdom. Halvern Reach appeared as a pale ridge. Beyond it, the eastern corridor darkened into a spiral. She adjusted the lens until thin red points emerged inside the spiral, spaced at equal intervals. Veyron lightning markers. One counselor leaned closer. Those are invisible from the upper formation. A captain flying lead height would see them pulling charge into a closed circle. Narek's gaze fixed on the red points. Tovan was flying lead height. He would have seen them before Kaldor's order reached him. Kaldor said, "Markers inside enemy weather do not prove a prepared trap. Veyron storms seed naturally around iron-rich cloud." Ressa turned the lens. Natural markers scattered. These formed a 9-point cage. 1 point for every dragon in Tovan's formation. Silence pressed against the glass walls. The eastern route had not wandered into bad weather. It had been measured for the size of the fleet. Narek's scarred wing shifted behind him. Ressa noticed the cage widen at the northern edge. Not enough for a dragon to escape. Enough to injure one without killing it. She looked at him. Your wing was supposed to enter here. Narek stepped beside her. The widened channel matched the position he had flown as Northern Command. Lightning would have struck the left wing, forced him down, and separated him from the royal formation while leaving him alive long enough for command to pass. "To Caldor," he said. Caldor's expression did not change. "You are reading intention into enemy geometry. I am reading command succession into the only opening in a closed storm cage. The northern wing survived because I redirected it. You redirected Tovin's formation east and moved yourself toward central command." Caldor's voice hardened. "The king was already losing altitude. Someone had to preserve command." Narek looked at him. "Before or after my wing was struck?" "During the collapse." Ressa returned to the lens. A second set of marks crossed the trap points. Signal strokes. Short. Long. Short. 2 descending arcs. She knew that rhythm. Every royal flight family carried a private storm code used when ordinary signals failed inside cloud. The Volaris line had guarded theirs for generations. "Who taught the Vayrans this pattern?" she asked. Caldor said nothing. Narek came closer. "What pattern?" Ressa traced it on the glass. "Volaris blood call. It tells royal dragons where to hold formation when visibility disappears. Only the royal family knows that code," a counselor said. "And Tovin," Caldor replied. "As captain. Captains knew the response, not the initiating rhythm." The opening stroke stayed inside the royal flight line. Caldor looked toward Narek. "Then perhaps the enemy copied your signals during an earlier campaign." "Not this version," Narek said. The final descending arc was a correction he had created after his coronation. Only he and Caldor had used it. Ressa examined the pressure angle. The signal had entered the trap before the fleet launched. It was not copied from battle. Someone had prepared the cage with the royal formation code in advance. Caldor stepped away from the table. "Enemy possession of royal code is precisely why I changed the route." "No, you changed the route into the coordinates where that code was waiting. You cannot prove who sent it." "Not yet." She lowered the lens. The trap had been built to kill Tovin's formation, scar Narek's wing, and leave secondary command intact. Caldor had not needed to seize the throne. He only needed the king wounded, the captain dead, and the widow blamed for the route. Narek looked at the red cage, then at the brother he had trusted with unfinished authority. The betrayal no longer ended at the eastern turn. It began before the dragons ever left the palace. Embedded beneath the final lightning marker, the storm lens revealed a launch signature. Not Veyran, Volaris. The trap had been armed with a royal family code before Ressa drew the rescue route. The royal code had been waiting inside the storm before Ressa ever touched the first line of her rescue route. That meant the ambush required more than a false command. It required a place prepared to receive it. Ressa returned the storm lens to its frame and looked through the glass floor toward Halvern Reach. The town appeared only when the clouds opened. Dark roofs gathered beneath the eastern ridge, too small from the war chamber to show the 800 people who had once waited there for the sky to kill them. "The Veyran cage needed a ground anchor," she said. Caldor's expression remained controlled. "Enemy storm traps are suspended in cloud, not cages built to hold royal dragons in formation. The lightning markers needed one fixed point below the current." Narek followed her gaze. "Where?" "The abandoned weather spire east of Halvern Reach." Caldor turned toward the council. "That structure fell during the ambush. The upper mast fell," Ressa said. "The storm route would still be buried in the ridge. And after 6 years, you expect it to preserve a launch signal? Royal storm code burns into conductive stone. If the anchor was armed before launch, the route will carry the first hand that set it." Caldor stepped closer to his brother. Sending the king into an abandoned warfield on the interpretation of a dismissed navigator would be reckless. Ressa looked at Narek. "Then send soldiers who cannot read what they find and let the evidence disappear a second time." His eyes narrowed. She had once softened such words around him. Before Tovin died, before Narek stood before the kingdom and burned her work to prove royal honesty. Now she had no reason to make truth easier for him to hear. "Prepare 3 dragons," Narek ordered. He did not restore her title. He did not dismiss the guards who had stood between her and the brazier. But he chose to leave the safety of the chamber and follow the evidence into open sky. Caldor said, "As secondary commander, I should lead the recovery." "No," Narek replied. "You will accompany us where I can see your hands." They launched before the storm changed. Ressa rode behind a royal wing guard because the council had stripped her of flight command after the ambush. Narek flew ahead on a black war dragon whose left wing dipped whenever crosswind struck. Kaldor followed on a silver-scaled mount, close enough to appear loyal and far enough to choose another path if the clouds closed. The weather spire rose from the eastern ridge like a broken needle. Half its stonework had collapsed into the valley. The remaining mass still drew thin veins of red lightning from the clouds. Ressa saw the pattern before the soldiers did. 9. Point return current, she shouted over the wind. Do not enter from above. Narek turned his dragon hard. The soldiers followed him. Kaldor continued forward one breath too long before pulling away from the mast. Red lightning snapped through the space his dragon had occupied. Ressa watched him. A commander unfamiliar with the trap might have mistaken the silence above the spire for safety. Kaldor had avoided the first strike before she finished warning him. They landed beneath the ridge. The storm root lay inside a cracked chamber below the fallen mast. Copper-veined stone covered the walls. At the center stood a black crystal anchor shaped like a downward spear, its surface burned with old command marks. Kaldor stopped at the entrance. Veran construction. Ressa knelt beside the base. No. She brushed ash from the lower metal collar. Volaris forge lines curved beneath the soot. This was made in the Royal Sky Foundry. Narek stood behind her. When? The season before the ambush. Kaldor said, Captured royal equipment is used against us in every war. Then why was the family code engraved beneath the mounting plate? Ressa removed the first locking pin. The anchor resisted the second. Narek reached toward it. Do not. His hand stopped beside hers. The pin is carrying trapped charge, she said. Touch it with royal heat, and the anchor will erase its oldest pressure layer. For one suspended moment, his fingers remained close to her wrist. He had once recognized her lines before seeing her name. Now she remembered those same hands holding the edge of the brazier while Tovin's chart burned. Ressa moved away before contact could become comfort. Narek lowered his hand. She released the pin with a bone-handled grounding tool and lifted the mounting plate. 3 pressure records remained beneath it. The first showed the anchor armed from the palace direction before fleet launch. The second carried Kaldor's split-claw seal. The third had been cut later, violently, by a captain's flight hook. Ressa recognized the hook pattern. Tovin reached this chamber. Kaldor replied. Or someone used his equipment after his death. Ressa traced the cut. Tovin always pulled left before applying force because an old break had weakened 2 fingers in his right hand. The mark narrowed in precisely that direction. He made this. Narek crouched opposite her. What was he trying to do? Break the return current. If he found the anchor, why did the fleet still burn? Ressa examined the damaged collar. The 9-point cage had already closed. Tovan could not free the dragons inside it, but he had broken one lower channel leading toward Halvern Reach. The civilian corridor. He was not trying to save the fleet by then, she said. Kaldor seized the answer. You admit he abandoned formation. Ressa looked up at him. He knew the formation was lost. He was captain. He was also the only rider between the storm wall and the town. Narek's face changed slightly. Ressa continued reading the metal. Tovin's hook had locked the eastern current against his own dragon's flight tether. He had used the animal's body and wing strength as a living brace, holding the storm high enough for the civilian route to remain open. The route Ressa had drawn, the route the kingdom later called her fatal mistake. Tovin stayed here, she said. Narek looked toward the broken roof, where red lightning moved through the clouds. How long? Ressa found the final pressure groove beneath the collar. 1 hour. Then another. Then a third line cut so weakly it nearly vanished. Long enough for Halvern Reach to empty. Long enough for Ressa's evacuation convoy to clear the valley. Kaldor's voice remained cold. And long enough for his refusal to fracture the royal fleet. Ressa stood. No. The fleet was already inside your cage. She pulled the last fragment from beneath the anchor. Tovan's captain clasp had fused to the storm route. Its reverse carried a flight message scratched by hand. Ressa's route held. Civilians cleared. Royal command compromised. Below those words, Tovin had carved one final warning before the lightning took the rest of the metal. Kaldor knew the trap before launch. The message on Tovin's clasp did not have time to become evidence before the storm route began to wake. A low vibration moved through the buried chamber. Red light climbed the black crystal anchor, filling the old pressure grooves one after another. Ressa looked toward the broken roof. Everyone out. Kaldor did not move. Removing the clasp released residual charge. That proves only that Moor damaged the anchor. The charge is not residual. The first lightning marker above the ridge answered. Then the second. Then all 9. Outside, the royal dragons screamed as the old cage rebuilt around them. Narek turned toward the entrance. Can it close again? It was never fully dead. Tovan broke the civilian channel, not the central return. Kaldor said, Then replace the clasp and restore the seal. Ressa looked at him. You knew what removal would do. I commanded storm weapons for 12 years. You called this Veyran construction. Enemy use does not change what I learned in war. The chamber shook. Ressa studied the anchor instead of Kaldor. Once the pressure reached the 9th point, the cage would pull every dragon above Halvern Reach into the same closed formation that had killed Tovan's fleet. The broken civilian channel was reconnecting over the town. How long? Narek asked. 7 minutes before full closure. He stepped toward the anchor. Tell me where to strike. Royal heat would feed it. Then what do you need? Ressa looked at the dragons fighting the wind. A flight line. Kaldor's mouth tightened. She has not commanded a royal formation since the ambush. She has not been allowed to, Narek said. Ressa faced him. If you want the town alive, you will fly where I place you. Narek did not look toward the guards. Give the order. The words carried more weight than an apology would have. Ressa climbed from the chamber and took the captain's position on the ridge. She had no restored title, but the dragons were already turning toward her hand signals. Not because they chose her, because she knew the wind. Narek, northern cut. Keep your left wing low until the 3rd marker. His jaw tightened at the reference to the scarred wing. He obeyed. Kaldor, eastern rise. Do not cross the red current. They launched. Red lightning stretched between the markers like wire through cloud. Narek now. The black war dragon folded one wing and dropped through the northern cut. Narek's injured side dipped exactly as Ressa calculated, drawing the upper current away from the town without letting it close around him. Kaldor climbed too high. Lower, Ressa shouted. The eastern marker is breaking. It is bait. Lower. He ignored her for one breath. The marker opened beneath him, revealing a second red line hidden inside the cloud. His silver dragon twisted away before the strike. Again, Kaldor recognized danger almost before it appeared. Ressa saw Narek notice. Follow her command, he called. Kaldor descended. The king who had burned Ressa's charts now made his brother obey the widow he had disgraced. The 9th marker brightened. Tovan's old break remained near the ridge, but the storm had grown around it. Someone had to pull the return line upward while another rider reopened the civilian channel. Tovan held it alone, Narek said. He should not have had to. Neither should you. This is not the time to protect me from work you refuse to understand. He accepted the blow. What is the order? Ressa pointed toward the central current. Draw the cage upward. I will open the lower channel. If it closes on you, then hold it higher. Narek turned his dragon into the red current. Lightning struck along his left wing. The old scar flared silver beneath the scales, but he held formation exactly where she placed him. Ressa dropped toward the broken mast. The lower guard tried to follow. No. Clear the first roofs. She descended alone. At the storm route, Tovan's damaged channel waited half open. Ressa drove his captain clasp into the collar, not to restore the old seal, but to complete the cut he had begun. Above her, Narek roared as the cage pulled against his wings. Ressa turned the clasp. The civilian channel opened. Red lightning split around Halvern Reach and poured into the empty valley beyond. The cage collapsed one marker at a time. Narek fell through the cloud. Then his black dragon caught the lower wind and climbed again, one wing trailing sparks. They landed on the ridge in rain and ash. Narek dismounted unsteadily. Ressa moved toward the damaged wing by instinct. His hand lifted as if to touch her shoulder. She stepped back. He let it fall. Kaldor landed last. The storm route had gone dark, but one fresh line remained inside the open civilian channel. Ressa knelt beside it. This pressure was not 6 years old. Someone had reset the cage after the ambush. The new mark carried the same split-claw seal. Kaldor had not merely prepared the original trap. He had returned later to make sure the root could kill again. The new seal was younger than the grave it had been built to protect. Ressa carried the Stormroot collar back into the Cloud War chamber, wrapped in grounding cloth. Rain still darkened her widow's coat. Tovan's captain clasp rested inside the metal, fused where he had held the civilian channel open. Kaldor entered under guard. He had not been arrested. Narek had ordered him watched, not condemned. The difference remained sharp enough for Ressa to feel. She placed the collar on the suspended war table. The second reset happened after the ambush, she said. The pressure edge is too clean to belong to the original arming. Kaldor looked at the metal. Captured storm weapons were routinely reset for defensive study. By whose order? Secondary Command Authority. Narek stood opposite him, one hand braced against the table. Burn marks crossed the armor over his injured wing. When? Ressa loosened the grounding cloth and examined the crystal residue beneath the split claw seal. Storm crystal aged in layers. Each cloud season left a pale mineral ring around the command groove. 6 rings surrounded Tovan's final cut. Only 4 surrounded Kaldor's reset. 2 years after the fleet died, she said. One of the counselors frowned. The Halvern inquiry had already closed. So had Ressa's command office, Kaldor replied. The site became military property. Ressa traced the new pressure line. The reset did not rebuild the entire 9-point cage. It rebuilt only the command return the channel that told royal dragons which voice to obey once the storm closed around them. You did not preserve the weapon, she said. You preserved control of the formation inside it. A trap understood can become a defense, not when its command line points inward. She rotated the collar. The rebuilt channel did not face the Veyron border. It faced the royal launch corridor above the palace. Any royal fleet entering the eastern storms would receive its return command through Kaldor's seal. Narek looked at his brother. Why would the formation answer you? Because after Halvern Reach, the council recognized divided command as a weakness. Ressa remembered the decree. Narek had lain fevered with lightning burns while Kaldor stood before the War Council and argued that no fleet should ever again depend upon one wounded king or one defiant captain. The council created a new office, Sovereign Flight Regent. Kaldor received permanent authority to assume aerial command whenever Narek was separated, injured, or judged unable to maintain storm formation. The office had been built from the disaster Kaldor arranged. Narek's voice lowered. You reset the anchor after receiving the regency. I secured the kingdom against another command collapse. You secured a storm line that answered only to you. Kaldor looked toward the council. My brother's wing never fully recovered. Everyone in this chamber knows it. If he fell during a border storm, someone had to bring the fleet home. Ressa heard the argument beneath the words. Kaldor did not need Narek dead. He needed Narek damaged enough that every crisis passed authority into his hands. Tovan threatened the office before it existed, she said. Kaldor's gaze returned to her. He saw the trap. He refused your route. If he returned, he could prove the fleet did not fail because command was divided. He fractured formation under sovereign order. He exposed the reason you needed sovereign order to silence him. Kaldor's expression remained calm, but the chamber's storm lamps dimmed as clouds gathered below the glass floor. Ressa looked at Tovan's clasp. Her husband had known Kaldor's betrayal before the fleet died. He had stayed behind not only to save Halvern Reach, but because returning to command with that knowledge had become impossible once Narek's seal forced the eastern turn. And I was useful afterward, she said. Narek looked at her. Kaldor did not answer. You needed a living failure, Ressa continued. Someone whose hand could be blamed for the first deviation. Your mark was on the rescue route. Yes. My mercy gave you the first line of the trap. The council had called Halvern Reach an unauthorized distraction. Kaldor had used the rescue route to explain why the formation left its original path. Then he concealed the later Eastern Command beneath Narek's authority. Tovan became the dead captain who obeyed his wife. Ressa became the widow whose judgment killed him. Kaldor became the commander who inherited the broken fleet. Narek's fingers tightened against the table. He had burned her charts after signing the silence that killed her husband. The thought moved across his face even though he did not speak it. A king could divide command. He could not divide responsibility. Kaldor turned toward the council banners. You are allowing grief to build motive from necessity. Halvern Reach weakened the formation. Captain Moor refused correction. The king was wounded. I restored command afterward because someone had to. Ressa lifted the collar. Then why does the reset include Tovan's captain frequency? Narek looked down. A narrow groove ran beneath Kaldor's seal, cut to recognize one specific dragonflight clasp, Tovan's. The rebuilt storm line had been designed to capture his command frequency if it ever returned to the eastern corridor. Kaldor had reset the cage after Tovan was officially dead. Not for defense, to catch any surviving message, flight echo, or evidence still answering to his captain mark. You went back to silence what he left behind, Ressa said. Kaldor's composure changed by less than a breath. It was enough. Narek straightened. Remove his command seal. The chamber did not obey. Instead, the black dragon iron chains supporting the war room locked into place. Storm shutters closed over the glass walls. The royal flight banners turned from Narek's crest toward the split claw seal of the sovereign flight regent. Kaldor looked at his brother. You gave the office authority whenever the Dragon King's storm judgment became compromised. Narek's injured wing sparked behind him. The chamber recognized the wound. Kaldor had arranged the ambush, inherited command from its damage, and written that damage into the law. The war table sealed beneath his hands. Dragon King Narek Volaris is suspended from active flight authority, Kaldor said. Ressa Moor is detained for manipulating a royal storm weapon. Outside the shutters, the palace dragons began answering Kaldor's call. The Cloud War Chamber had been built to obey a wounded king only until another man declared him unfit. Black shutters sealed the storm outside. Dragon iron chains locked beneath the glass floor, while Kaldor's split-claw banners replaced Narek's crest one by one. Ressa stood between two guards. Narek stood without command. Below them, palace dragons turned toward the eastern launch towers as Kaldor's call entered the royal flight lines. Release the chamber, Narek said. Kaldor placed one hand on the sealed war table. Your storm judgment is compromised. The law recognizes injury before intention. You wrote that law from the wound you arranged. I wrote it after one damaged wing divided command. Ressa watched the command chains beneath the floor. They were carrying Kaldor's authority into every launch dock. 3 routes opened beneath his hand. The northern border, the capital, Halvern Reach. The eastern line glowed first. You are sending them back to the anchor, she said. Kaldor looked at the guards. Remove her. Ressa did not resist as they took her arms. Resistance would let him call her unstable. She kept watching the table. You mean to destroy the storm route before the council can examine it? A battlefield weapon cannot remain beneath a civilian town. You left it there for 6 years. Narek saw the route. Stand down the launch. The chamber ignored him. One tower opened below, then another. Ressa felt the guards pull her toward the western door. She turned her wrist, caught one gauntlet against her map case, and freed her right hand. From the case, she drew a narrow wind needle. Kaldor barely glanced at it. A navigator's tool cannot challenge a regency seal. It does not need to. Ressa drove the needle into the floor joint beside her boot. The glass brightened. Not the living storm map. The chamber's balance grid. Every suspended war room required 3 verified pressures before transferring flight authority: royal heat, command seal, and stable wind judgment. Kaldor held the first 2 through Narek's law. He did not hold the third. The grid had accepted his claim. Because it still read Narek's injured wing as unstable, Ressa turned the needle. The balance lines recalculated around the king's actual weight. Narek's left wing sparkled. Kaldor's banners flickered. What did you change? Nothing. I removed the false wind. The chamber tilted. The guards released her to keep their footing. Ressa crossed to Narek. Open your left wing. It will not hold full span. I did not ask for full. She held the wind needle beside the scar without touching him. Half span. 3 breaths. Lower on the second. Kaldor said, he cannot validate command while under a dismissed navigator's influence. Ressa met Narek's eyes. Then decide whether you are obeying me or using me. Narek opened the damaged wing. Pain crossed his face, but he held the span where she placed it. 1. The chamber shifted. 2. Lower. He lowered the scarred edge. The balance grid found the same correction Ressa had calculated for him years earlier. 3. The royal heat line steadied. Kaldor's banners went dark. For one breath, the chamber recognized Narek again. Cancel the eastern launch, he ordered. Nothing happened. Kaldor's mouth curved without warmth. The dragons accepted the command before your authority returned. Through the narrowing shutter gap, 6 royal dragons were already flying east beneath Kaldor's red signal. How long to Halvern Reach? Narek asked. Less than an hour, Ressa said. By then, Kaldor replied, the anchor will be ash. Evidence, Ressa said. And if the cage wakes beneath the town again, then I will close it. You no longer command a squadron. Ressa turned toward Narek. He had burned her charts, dismissed her knowledge, and allowed her husband's death to remain beneath her name. If he gave her command now, only because he needed her, it repaired nothing. But Halvern Reach did not have time for his remorse. Give me the rescue wing, Kaldor laughed once. A disgraced widow cannot receive royal flight authority during an active succession suspension. Not royal authority, Ressa said. Operational command. Narek understood. If he appointed her through the crown, Kaldor could challenge it as compromised judgment. If Narek surrendered his place and flew beneath her civilian rescue command, the king would have to obey the woman he had blamed. Narek removed the black command class from his armor and placed it on the table. I will fly second under Ressa Moor. The counselors remained silent. Kaldor's composure finally narrowed. You would place the Dragon King beneath a dismissed navigator? Narek looked at the eastern route. I already placed a fleet beneath a blank command. He faced Ressa. This time, the order belongs to the person who can read where it leads. The western shutters released. Storm air tore through the chamber. Ressa took the clasp but did not fasten it to her coat. She closed her hand around it. Prepare the rescue wing. No one flies above my line. Below them, the palace dragons answered the new formation call. All except one. Kaldor's silver dragon had already left the eastern tower. He was flying ahead of the squadron toward Halvern Reach, and he still carried Narek's missing storm key. By the time the rescue wing cleared the palace spires, Kaldor had already entered the eastern storm. Ressa flew at the head of 6 dragons with Narek one position behind her. He had not reclaimed command. He had not asked whether she intended to return it. Rain struck their armor hard enough to blur the mountain lights. Ahead, red lightning moved through the clouds in the same 9-point pattern that had killed Tovin's formation. Kaldor's silver dragon disappeared inside the first marker. The storm key opened the royal channel. A command entered every rescue bridle at once. Return to sovereign formation. 3 dragons began turning away from Ressa. Cut the royal lines, she ordered. One rider hesitated. Those are crown-bound. Cut them or follow Kaldor into the cage. Narek drew his flight blade first. He severed the silver command cord running from his saddle to the royal channel. The line burned across his glove and fell into the clouds. The other riders followed. For the first time in generations, a royal rescue wing entered battle without a king's command bound into its bridles. Kaldor's voice reached them through the storm key. Ressa Moor has compromised royal formation. All riders answer the sovereign channel. Narek looked toward her. She expected conflict. He only asked, what formation? Civilian descent. Double crescent. That leaves the center open. It leaves Kaldor nothing to command. Ressa split the wing around Halvern Reach. The dragons moved by hand signal, pressure spacing, and direct visual line, the older rescue method used before royal storm keys made obedience faster than judgment. Below, people were already leaving their homes. The warning bells had reached them from the first anchor wake. Kaldor descended toward the broken weather spire. He is going for the route, Narek said. No, he is going to overload it. If he destroys it, he destroys the evidence, and sends the return current through the town. Narek angled his dragon east. Ressa cut across him. Hold the northern channel. My brother is below. So are 800 civilians. His jaw tightened. Years earlier, Tovin had faced the same choice without a king willing to listen. Ressa did not soften the order. Hold the channel. Narek turned away from Kaldor. He obeyed her. The black war dragon climbed into the northern current and opened its scarred wing across the first 2 markers. Red lightning struck along the old wound. Narek held position while the rescue wing guided the first civilians out of the valley. Kaldor reached the anchor chamber. The storm key flared inside his gauntlet. Every red marker brightened. Ressa felt the cage begin to close. Tovin's cut is failing, one rider called. I know. She dropped toward the ridge. A lance of lightning passed beneath her dragon's chest. The animal rolled, recovered, and struck the lower wind exactly where she placed it. Kaldor stood beside the exposed storm route when she landed. The black crystal anchor pulsed beneath his hand. You cannot stop the current without royal heat, he said. I do not need to stop it. You intend to redirect it through my seal. You built the return line to answer your command. It answered the crown. It answered borrowed authority. Kaldor's face hardened. The fleet needed one voice. Tovin refused it. You weakened formation for civilians who had no strategic value. Ressa approached the anchor. 800 people were not strategically valuable to you. They were a town beneath a war. They were the reason Tovin knew you should never command one. Kaldor drove the storm key deeper into the root. The anchor opened. Red light climbed from his gauntlet into the 9-point cage. Above them, Narek's dragon dropped under the strain. Ressa saw his left wing buckle. She did not run toward him. She trusted him to hold the place she had given him. That trust cost more than fear. Ressa pulled Tovin's captain clasp from inside her coat and fitted it into the broken civilian channel. The anchor recognized the old pressure pattern, not Tovin's name, his unfinished cut. Kaldor tried to remove the storm key. The current had already accepted him as the active command source. Red lightning wrapped around the silver dragon waiting above the ridge and forced it lower. Kaldor looked toward Narek. Brother. Narek heard him across the storm. Ressa saw the king's dragon turn half a wing. Do not leave the northern channel, she said. Kaldor's voice sharpened. She is ordering you to watch your own blood die. Ressa kept both hands on the captain clasp. No, I am ordering him not to kill a town to save the man endangering it. Narek remained where she placed him. The northern channel held. Kaldor had expected royal love, guilt, or habit to break formation. For the first time, none of them did. Ressa turned Tovin's clasp. The civilian cut widened. The return current left Halvern Reach and followed the only active royal command still feeding the cage. Kaldor's storm key. Red lightning struck the anchor around his hand. He released it before the current closed completely, but the gauntlet tore free with the key still locked inside. The command seal remained connected to the root. Kaldor fell back. His silver dragon lost the cage's support and crashed onto the ridge hard enough to shatter one saddle wing, but it lived. Narek descended only after the final civilians cleared the valley. He landed between Kaldor and the open sky. The prince reached for a secondary flight blade. Narek removed it from his hand. You gave me blank authority, Kaldor said. You needed someone willing to use it. I needed a brother I could trust. You needed victories, and you built them from obedience. No one was allowed to question. Royal guards landed around the ridge. This time, Narek did not order Kaldor watched. Bend his hands. Kaldor looked at Ressa as the guards took him. You think a widow's root can hold a kingdom together? Ressa removed the storm key from the broken gauntlet. No. She looked toward Halvern Reach, where the last civilians crossed the southern ridge. But it held the people you were willing to lose. The storm cage collapsed. One red marker after another went dark until only the scarred northern channel remained. Narek descended from his dragon with blood running beneath the armor over his left wing. He stopped before Ressa. The old instinct moved through him, the instinct to reach for her, to steady her, to close the distance his authority had opened. Ressa stepped back. He let his hand fall. Above them, every surviving dragon in the rescue wing held formation behind her, not behind the king. Ressa placed Kaldor's storm key on the broken anchor. Take your brother back to the council. Narek looked at the woman whose charts he had burned and whose command had just saved his kingdom. And you? She turned toward Tovin's clasp, still fixed inside the civilian channel. I am bringing my husband's root home. The Cloud War Chamber received them at dawn with its shutters open to the storm. Kaldor stood beneath guard at the center of the glass floor. His split claw banners were gone. The recovered storm key, Tovin's captain clasp, the anchor collar, and Narek's pre-signed order lay together on the suspended war table. Ressa placed the clasp beside the root plate. No one asked her to stand below the council dais. Narek did not sit upon it. He remained beside the evidence with his left wing bandaged beneath dark armor. Kaldor faced the council without pleading. You will condemn me because the town survived, he said. But kingdoms are not preserved by choosing every civilian over command. The fleet was already inside your trap, Ressa replied. The captain fractured formation. He refused a route designed to kill him. He refused sovereign authority. Narek's voice cut across the chamber. My authority. He looked at the council. I signed the blank order. I placed my storm key in command custody. I allowed another man to speak with my heat because speed mattered more than knowing what would be said. The fleet obeyed because a kingdom cannot survive if every captain debates the crown. A royal seal does not make a command true, Ressa said. It makes refusal impossible. Narek did not defend himself. I burned Ressa Moor's charts because I wanted proof that the crown concealed no failure. Instead, I destroyed the surviving language of Tovan Moor's final decision while the command that killed him still carried my mark. The living storm map remained dark above them. The route plate established sequence. The custody order established authority. The storm anchor established preparation. Tovan's clasp established what he chose after the trap closed. Ressa unfolded fresh sky vellum. She drew the southern passage around Halvern Reach, the civilian corridor beneath the storm cage, and the eastern ridge where Tovan locked his dragon's flight tether into the anchor and held the storm high while the town escaped. Then she wrote his name beside the line. Tovan Moor, captain of the civilian hold, guardian of Halvern Reach, not victim of navigational error, not husband misled by his wife. The council scribe scraped the old designation from the war record. It did not return Tovan's body or erase 6 years of people treating Ressa's grief as guilt, but it ended the kingdom's right to call his sacrifice her crime. Kaldor was stripped of command and taken for trial on conspiracy against the crown, unlawful use of sovereign authority, deliberate endangerment of civilians, and falsification of war routes. He did not confess. He argued that divided command required one decisive hand, and that Narek's damaged wing proved the kingdom had needed him. Ressa believed he meant it. That did not make it less deliberate. Afterward, she left the chamber before Narek could ask her to remain. "Where do we place the new command line?" the rescue captain asked. "Not inside the Royal Channel." Ressa proposed an independent sky route archive at Halvern Reach. Civilian navigators, dragon captains, weather keepers, and town representatives would preserve every emergency alteration in open sequence. No ruler could burn a route without public notice. No storm key could override a captain without leaving a visible mark. Narek signed the charter and surrendered exclusive control of the royal flight channels. He told the council no throne deserved obedience, it could not survive without concealment. Weeks later, Ressa stood on the rebuilt weather spire above Halvern Reach, teaching young navigators to read pressure scars in storm glass. A black dragon landed on the western platform. Narek arrived without escort or crown. His left wing remained stiff, where the lightning had reopened the old wound. Ressa finished the lesson before facing him. "You flew alone. You taught the rescue wing not to depend upon a royal channel. That was not permission to ignore recovery." "No." He placed a rolled chart on the stone table. "What is it?" "My current flight balance." "You have royal navigators. They chart the wing I command them to see." The answer angered her because it was honest. She opened the vellum. The official lines hid how much weight the left wing could no longer carry. Ressa reached for charcoal. His hand moved toward hers by instinct. She stepped back. He stopped before touching her. "You burned the last chart my husband carried," she said. "Yes. You let the kingdom call my mercy murder." "Yes. You do not earn my trust because you obeyed me in one storm." "No." Narek removed the royal command clasp from his coat and set it beside the chart. "I am not asking you to serve my crown. What are you asking? Teach me how to fly without making obedience do the work of judgment." Ressa studied him, then redrew the line around his scarred wing. "You will fly behind me. I know. You will not alter the route. I know. And when I tell you the town matters more than the formation? Narek Volaris. I will remember who taught me what a formation is for." Ressa handed him the corrected chart. She did not forgive him. But when they launched into the evening storm, the Dragon King took second position beneath her command. Above Halvern Reach, the living storm map traced no royal crest, only 2 flight lines. One leading, one learning how to follow,